you think your vote doesn't matter, you need to think again, because history shows that some of the world's most horrific events occurred because the public was disengaged. Either they weren't aware of what was happening in their country, or they just didn't care. Andy Andrews makes his case against apathy in a brand new book, a startling book called How Do You Kill 11 Million People? Andy Andrews joins me now. Andy, it's great to have you here. It's a pretty remarkable book. You can read it in 15 minutes. It's not a partisan book. You don't take a position about the elections. But one of the things that you point out is that twice in the past 6 presidential elections, the voting age population has exceeded the number of votes cast for president by 100 million. In other words, 100 million people could have voted and just sat it out.
Right. And the swing is 10 million. In the past 25 years, there's not been a single presidential election won by more than 10 million votes. They've all been that close.
And here's what I found very startling. I'm a believer, and so I always, see what the Christian voting trends are, people
Right.
who self-identify as believers. 65 million of those 100 million call themselves Christian believers and did not vote. And the margin was 10 million. If those 65 million had voted, the election would have been turned.
Right. And you certainly can look forward and say that we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening today if we will grab hold.
Why don't people vote?
I think there's 2 reasons Christians don't vote. I think the first reason is they think that their vote doesn't matter. But if you look at the statistics, and if you look back to Germany and what happened, and understand that was a population of 80 million people, and the Nazi Party never had more than 8.5 million members. So literally 10% of that country dragged those people into that nightmare. So if 10% can do that, certainly 10% of us can get together and pull our country into a place our founding fathers intended. But I think the big reason that Christians don't vote is they look at the choices sometimes and they think, I don't like any of them. I don't identify with any of them. But what we have to understand, I believe, right now, is that if you look at us like a ship and we're headed for an iceberg, well, maybe you don't have the captain right now that's going to turn this thing around. But maybe that person happens in 4 years. Maybe God puts that person in 8 years. But right now, if we don't change the direction, we're going to hit the iceberg. So what we need to do is find somebody who lines up with the way we believe on the major things like abortion or economics and vote, because
But don't Christians think you've got to find somebody that's perfect, somebody that agrees with them on every point, and that's largely the problem. There's no one that's going to satisfy 100 different things that they want.
Right. Well, Christians, of all people, we should know that there was only one person who was perfect.
He's not on the ballot.
He's not on the ballot. He won't run. And so I really believe, though, that if we will think this is not necessarily about the election, it's about the direction. Because we have to get the direction going in a different way. Otherwise, we're in big trouble.
Let's talk about the book's title. That to me was startling when I first saw it. How do you kill 11 million people? I mean, that gets my attention.
A little touchy-feely.
And obviously, you're referencing the Holocaust. And you make a very simple point. How do you kill 11 million people?
You know, the title refers to a problem or something that bothered me about the Holocaust beyond the obvious, because I would watch documentaries or read books and I would see these thousands of people loading themselves onto rail cars, relatively few Nazi guards, and thinking, why don't they just rush them? Why don't they fight or run? And the answer, when I found it, was stunning, because it is a method being used by some elected leaders today to achieve various goals. How do you kill 11 million people? Very simple. You lie to them. These people were loading themselves onto trains because they had been told they were being moved out of the way of the Russian front, that they were being moved to factory jobs, the schools for their children, and they thought they were okay. They were specifically lied to.
How do we keep from being lied to? I mean, nobody's marching us right now to gas chambers, but it has happened historically with well-educated people in a very sophisticated society. This was not some third world country, most advanced country in the world at that time, and yet people willingly marched into their own death.
Right.
How do we know?
Well, it frightens me sometimes to talk to people about that time, because they say things about Hitler like, well, when he took over and when he became a dictator, but people forget he didn't take over. He was elected. Just like you said, Germany was a democracy. And so, you know, this was an educated population, but we have to pay attention. You know, the apathy is appalling. And I think now, of course, with the internet, with shows like this, I mean, frankly, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I haven't got 24 hours a day to pay total attention to this. And I use you and several others as my view from 30,000 feet.
Well, that's a very wise choice, by the way, to watch this show, to get your... One final question, Andy. How do we know the difference between the good guys and the bad guys? I mean, is there some criteria that we can apply to make a judgment about how to vote? And
I think that telling the truth could be a great starting point. You know, and I really believe the question we need to ask ourselves is not necessarily, because the question we need to ask ourselves is, what are our standards for being led? Because the danger America faces is not one politician with ill intent or even a group of them. The biggest danger we face is a populace who's able to sit aside and allow a liar to lead them.
The book is called How Do You Kill 11 Million People? Andy Andrews, thank you very much.
Thank you, buddy.
Pleasure to have you with us.